Well, good morning and welcome to another action-packed, exciting episode of Hidden in the Heartland podcast. I am here in Provo, Utah, and on the other side of the galaxy is my good friend Mark Burris, coming live from Palmyra. And how are you doing this morning, Mark?
Doing pretty good. Pretty good.
Awesome. That's good to hear. So,
How's the weather out in Utah? Is it starting to get cold or is it
starting to get
still?
chilly. You can see the leaves are gone and the leaves are down and it's starting to get cold. And yeah, I can't, not a big fan of snow, but I lived through it. And so that's how that goes. How about you? Is your weather changing pretty rapidly?
Yeah, it's starting to get cold. We're starting to get used to daylight savings again. So,
Yeah. Oh yeah. We
all
just
good.
had daylight savings. That's right. That's the sign that here comes winter. It's that darn daylight savings time. But anyway, well, today we're going to have some fun. First, what I wanted to do is make a couple of announcements. One is we had a Book of Mormon getaway, and we're having a hard time finding our winner or hearing from our winner. Our winner is Michael Faulkner. And so, Michael Faulkner, if you are watching this, just contact one of us if you can, or the Hidden in the Heartland Facebook page, and we will send you your prize from Mark Burris. So just let us know. I think his full name was F. Michael Faulkner. So anyway, so we're excited to hear from you. The other announcement is this will be the last podcast for the rest of the year. We're going to take the rest of the next few weeks off. And then January, we'll start off fresh with a whole bunch of new content that we hope to be able to keep up with. There's so much out there. I'm telling you, when we do this research, there's a lot to talk about. And we'll start bringing guests on next year. And so we have some people we're going to be talking to. And then we'll keep this research going the best that our time is able to allow us. And so we'll just letting you know to have a good holiday as it comes up. Enjoy the time with your family. And then if you're sitting around and you need, content that you haven't seen, look at our older videos. Don't be afraid to go through and see past videos. We have the whole season, the previous episodes that we've done that were on television, all on here. We have a bunch of bonus episodes. So go on through there and just enjoy all of the content and be a fan and subscribe and share it with your friends. So thank you so much for joining us for the Hidden in the Heartland podcast. Today, I am going to magically switch our screen on over as I try to do. The transition is so amazingly smooth, as you can see. There we go. And we're going to talk about Prince Madoc. So I hear he's a pretty good guy. I guess we'll find out. So but Prince Madoc is kind of more a legend than I think we know. What we're going to share today is going to be, a lot of people will probably ask the question, what does this have to do with the Book of Mormon? There's a little bit that it does. A lot of it comes from time frame. Now, one of the things that you really want to do when you're doing Book of Mormon research is obviously we have the text of the Book of Mormon itself, and we have our faith, and we have our the spirit that enters in while you're reading it. And then there becomes little inklings of evidence. Now, the reason why it's fun to find out who else came to America is that they could actually tell us what they saw when they first came to America. Columbus is one thing, but you're looking at it being 1,000 years after the end of the Book of Mormon. If you can find earlier, I think earlier we talked about St. Brendan a few weeks ago, and about how St. Brendan was literally here probably around the very last part of Moroni's time, that they were probably, what did St. Brendan see when he came here? And there's a lot of legends about him coming here and calling it a land of promise, and there's a lot of similarities to what you see talked about in the Book of Mormon. So Prince Madoc is a little later, but his information is fascinating, and it's also good to just, again, see who was here long before Columbus. And this is another example, especially when people see a lot of these out of place, what they call out of place artifacts. And there's a lot of theories going around. So this is going to be another theory as to where these out of place artifacts came from. And so
also, we try hard not to say that anything that pops up is Book of Mormon. So there's a lot of artifact in North America. There's a lot of sites. There's a lot of evidence that people were here, and not all of it ties into the Book of Mormon. You might have people that are out there that are like, oh, it all ties into the Book of Mormon. So like Prince Madoc is one of those examples where we're finding evidence of people that came to North America, not necessarily part of the Book of Mormon, but like Kels had mentioned, they're able to let us know closer to the events, closer to the timeline of the Book of Mormon, what was going on in North America.
yeah.
So we try hard to look at possibilities and artifacts from other groups of people.
Well, and it's also fascinating that when you read the Book of Mormon, and we're about to read it again here for the new year, and even though we should be reading it all the time, when you read the Book of Mormon, you kind of get the impression of, technologically, you get the impression of like stone, everything in stone, and living in tents, and things being kind of temporary, and technology being really old, and you think of stone knives, and you're just old technology. You're thinking almost Adam and Eve level technology when you're reading the Book of Mormon. And then we forget that right after the Book of Mormon, we start getting into Anglo-Saxon, and that's those times touch. It's a definite bridge to crossover. I mean, as we're looking here at this image of Prince Madoc, I mean, the technology to make the things that he had was around when probably Moroni was around. So obviously there's a connection there to keep the advancement of technology and who was here and what did they have as the years go on. And so there's a connection there. And I'm probably not making sense, but hopefully this will make a little bit of sense when we go through Prince Madoc. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you two versions of Prince Madoc. And because there's a lot of confusion, and just doing the research was fairly exhaustive. And there's way more than what I'm even sharing with you today. And so hopefully I'll make some sense, and we'll have a good time. And then this is just the beginning of the study of something like Prince Madoc, just to show you there's a lot of content out there. Okay, so Prince Madoc, he is, and I'm going to butcher some of these names, so forgive me. He is known, and this is in 1170. Now, 1170 is not real close to Book of Mormon time frame, but what I'm going to show you later, you'll see what I'm talking about. Okay, so in 1170, Prince Madoc, he's the son of King Owain Gwynedd. So it's spelled Gwynedd. So King Owain Gwynedd of Wales. Okay, so he's the son of this king. And supposedly he sailed to America. And then when he went to America, after he went to America, he returned, and he went back to Wales, and then he turned around and he brought about 120 men with him, and men, women, and children with him to the new Western country, is how he pronounced it. And so this became a legend that kind of grew. In a lot of cases, sometimes this legend grew because it also helped in land claiming. Because, when we talk about the Menorah Mound, for example, there's the theory that our friend Hugh McCullough says that he said that the Menorah Mound was used, was a kind of a bargaining chip for Thomas Jefferson when he was going through purchasing, that part of the United States. And he used the Menorah Mound. Supposedly, he used the Menorah Mound to say, "Hey, French, you weren't here first. There were other people here, and look, it's Jewish or whatever." So to kind of prove that somebody else was here, so that they could purchase the Louisiana Purchase. And so anyway, so people will sometimes see something that shows that somebody was here before you, so that you can't totally claim, who it was. And so some say that they used the Prince Madoc legend to say the United States was visited by somebody else, so that they can claim the land. So I don't totally understand who was using that, but that's definitely one of the reasons, possibility of this legend, whether it be true or whether it be not. And some of the evidences that was brought about was in America. It says that there's a place called Fort Mountain Rock Formation in Georgia was one example as to evidence of the Welsh coming to America, and that there's Welsh caves in DeSoto Park in Alabama. And there's also ancient forts in a river in Tennessee, which could be Welsh. And there's a few. Those are just a few quick ones that you can utilize. I don't remember the names of all of these, but these are ones that were mentioned in an article, the St. George article that we're going to talk about here in a minute. Use those examples. They did say that Thomas Jefferson in 1804 wrote to Lewis of Lewis and Clark fame, asking him to be on the lookout for Welsh Indians. So obviously that piece of story was around, even as early as the late 1700s, early 1800s. So the Prince Madoc story is not new by any means. It's been around for a long time.
It's interesting when like we pull up these stories and these histories, how it ties in. Like people like Thomas Jefferson pop up. It's just really interesting because I had never heard of Prince Madoc, but clearly he was part of like the culture. Like people knew about the legend. They knew.
Yeah,
They knew
I'd
about
hardly
him.
heard
Like
of
it's
him either.
interesting.
Yeah, I'd never heard of him either until literally recently. I think I've heard his name before, but I never really put two and two together. When you read a lot of these books, they just kind of mention him and go, "Yeah, that's nice," and then they move on to other evidence. And so he's kind of a not necessarily forgotten character, but just not mentioned a lot, And so anyway, so that's, and one of the big, so there are some pieces of evidences that I was reading that we will probably dive into maybe some other time. Welsh caves in DeSoto Park, Alabama, ancient forts in a river in Tennessee. So we'll find that, we'll kind of do a little more research on that, but those are just ones that were mentioned in this St. George article, which we're going to talk about in just a minute. And so the other, here's the other, so here we go. So this is actually a sign that was put up. And one of the theories is that Prince Madoc actually when he got here, he came through Mobile Bay in Alabama. And I served my mission in Mobile, Alabama. So I remember riding my bike to Mobile Bay, but I don't remember this story at all. It says, in memory of Prince Madoc, a Welsh explorer who landed on the shores of Mobile Bay in 11. Listen to me. How early is it? 1170, and left behind with the Indians the Welsh language. So that's kind of interesting. And so they say that so there's that theory that Prince Madoc kind of blended in with and brought some people with him and blended in with the Native Americans. Authority is Encyclopedia Americana, copyright 1918, and so on. And then there's a bunch of credits given on this, but it's really fascinating. And so the theory kind of goes around that the Mandan are a product of Prince Madoc's seed, I guess, so to speak, or some of his people could have come and blended in with the Native Americans, and that's how you get the Mandan. Again, a theory, that's been going around, and most of it because the Mandan, supposedly, and even the Hopi, the Mandan and the Hopi. Let me get my notes here right. Light-skinned, possibly Mandan, maybe Hopi. This is actually Shakoka, this picture of a Mandan girl that was, she lived, I guess, in 1832. And there were reports of others who had blue eyes and lighter hair throughout the Mandan. So that's another, what they say was possible evidence of the blending of the Welsh. And when that happened, there became the Mandan with their own language. There became an effort to be able to see if their language was also had Welsh inside of it, and that's what we're going to go into. So here is these are some books that have mentioned Prince Madoc and the possibility of who he is. In The Mound Builders by Robert Silverberg, this is actually a really good book when you want to study the mound builders. He mentions Madoc, and it says, in explaining the mysterious mounds, Silverberg says, England's Robert Southey wrote a long poem called Madoc in 1805, describing the mounds as the ruins of cities built by a band of Welshmen who sailed to the New World in the 12th century. So this is obviously just a poem, but it shows you how early the interest was in of Prince Madoc. And okay, so here's another book that talks about, this one is In Plain Sight by Gloria Farley. If you can find this book, this is a really good book. I've loved going through it. I've owned it. It's a big book, but it's totally worth owning if you're doing this kind of research, and is not actually too hard to find. So this is the Shawnee Runestone. So that's what it highlighted in this book. So this is Gloria Farley. She says it talks about the Shawnee Runestone. The stone was found in central Oklahoma in the city limits of Shawnee, about 14 inches long, found by a guy named Jim Estep, who was out snake hunting. And he found this stone. He flipped it over, hoping to find snakes, but instead he found just some crazy writing. But obviously they were able to take this and have it preserved. And there's 5 letters that are on here, supposedly five rune letters. And there's other rune stones. You've heard of the Kensington rune stone. That's a big one that Scott Walter loves to talk about, and maybe one day we'll go into Kensington runestone. But when you translate the letters, supposedly it comes out to Medok, Medoc, which is obviously close to Madoc. And there's a theory that this stone could be either like a gravestone or a tribute stone to Madoc. Who knows? It's not highly likely, but but it is written there, and it's it's in this museum, and you can find it. So it's not too hard to find. Here's another mention of Madoc. Now, Hidden Cities is another great book, and we've mentioned Hidden Cities before. Roger Kennedy used to be a bigwig at the Smithsonian, and as he studied, his story is really fascinating. If you remember, what's his name? We featured him in Hidden in the Heartland. He did the documentary about. Oh goodness, all of a sudden it left me. But anyway, yeah, and he had Roger Kennedy on his documentary. And basically Roger Kennedy kind of woke up to the idea of, oh my goodness, there's a lot more here in ancient America than we know of. And so it was a great Steve Smoot's documentary. That's who it was. And anyway, so this is what he said. Roger gave many instances of the Welsh mixing with or starting the race of the Mandan. And what's funny is he comments on Joseph Smith a lot in this book. He'll constantly talk about Joseph Smith as a possibility when it comes to, and he'll name a bunch of other possibilities as well. And the Prince Madoc one is another. People have to realize that people will put the Prince Madoc theory in with Joseph Smith and his crazy Golden Bible theory. They kind of put them in the same camp, and then there's many others. And so that's why a lot of times when you talk about Prince Madoc, you're going to see Joseph Smith or the Book of Mormon being mentioned as well. And because what they're doing is they're saying we have all of these out of place artifacts and we don't know where they came from. Could it be these Nephites that this guy wrote in this Golden Bible, or could it have been Prince Madoc? Because there's, anyway, it's really fascinating.
And very, very likely that North America as it is now had lots of different groups living here. And
Yeah,
that the Book of Mormon, it's like the Bible is a record of the people in Israel, this small little place. It's not necessarily the record of the whole Middle East and that whole geographical area. The Book of Mormon is a record of the Nephites and the Lamanites.
that's
So
right. In their
two groups that were
geographical
here.
area.
Yeah, two groups that were here in North America. And we do know from the record of the Book of Mormon that the Lord said that the people that were brought here by him. And you kind of see that connection with these groups. They're not conquerors like Prince Madoc. It seems like they came here, they came here. It wasn't, their purpose wasn't to conquer or to find gold. A lot of times these people came for religious reasons, or we're gonna visit, a catastrophic event that may have happened in England, that might have brought these people here. So there's that possibility as well, where people are saying, hey, there's all these kooky theories, but there is the possibility that all these different groups were here.
That's
And
right.
they may have met up, or they may have just kind of geographically been separate. So
Or they may have seen each other's remains.
yeah.
A lot like the Nephites when they found the Jaredite remains.
Mm-hmm.
That same thing could have happened. Prince Madoc, Saint Brendan, any of these guys, any more that we will continue to talk about, they could have come here and went, oh my gosh, there's the remains of a certain people,
Yeah.
and who they could have
And
been.
what's interesting is even like when the Pilgrims showed up to North
Yeah,
America, they saw the remains of tons and tons of Native Americans that had passed away because of the the diseases that were brought over from Europe. So they saw piles of bones and they saw forts. So it's quite common that when people show up on the continent, they see the remains of the group of people that were here before, and
yeah,
they interact with who's left,
yeah.
and it's really interesting how that happens. There's a group of people that are almost completely wiped away, like the North American Indian when when the Spanish arrived in South America, they decimated the population. A lot of those diseases ended up in North America. And by the time the Pilgrims and the Puritans came over on boats, they saw forts, they saw piles of bones, because these natives were just decimated.
Yeah.
So it seems like when other people show up, it's right at the end of, or
Like
of a group of
Cahokia.
people almost
Yeah. Same
completely
thing
dying
happened.
off. Yeah.
Yeah. People showed up at Cahokia and there were still people living there, but it was pretty much the end of whatever it was. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
where's
I
the
mean,
party? Oh, they're all dead. So,
either by war or by disease or by famine or whatever the case may be. It seems
that's
like they
right.
always show up at the end of the previous. So
Yeah. That's a good point there, Mark. So Roger Kennedy, now these are some past things that Roger Kennedy has said. This is fascinating. This is a quote. He talks about Joseph Smith. He said, Smith became the founder of the only world religion to be based in American archaeology. Is that fascinating comment or what? I found that very fascinating that he brought that up. But going over to this guy with the hat here, this picture that you see, Roger Kennedy,
the Quaker Oats guy,
the Quaker Oats guy right here, Mr. Quaker Oats himself. This is John Evans. Now, John Evans is a Welshman, and according to Roger Kennedy, John Evans in 1794 visited with the Mandan because I guess he was Welsh. I think he was a Welshman. I didn't catch that, so don't quote me on that. But I think John Evans was a Welshman. But he visited with the Mandan, and his quote was that they didn't look very Welsh, but they did have Welsh in their language. So when he talked to them, according to him, it sounded like that there could have been a little Welsh. Maybe the dialect was a little different, but they didn't necessarily look Welsh. But he felt like that was their language. So that's according to Roger Kennedy in his book. So it's a story of a story of a story. So this one's interesting. This one will be fascinating to all of us, as those of us who are members of the church. This is Jacob Hamlin, and we all know his story, but do we know all of it? And so that's what we're going to bring out. This is actually an article in the St. George News, probably about not even a year ago. Wasn't very long ago. All right. So according to St. George News, Hamlin was called to an Indian mission in southern Utah on the banks of the Santa Clara River. Brigham Young knew of the Prince Madoc story of the legend, and he asked Hamlin to actually find a connection between the Hopi and the legendary Welsh Indians. So eventually what they did was they brought in Llewellyn Harris. So Hamlin went down for a while, made some relations, and then he came back with a guy named Llewellyn Harris, who was Welsh himself. And they brought him in to talk to the Hopi. And the response here was that he did notice a close resemblance to Welsh in their language. He said the Hopi could pronounce any word in the Welsh language with facility, whatever that means, facility, but not the dialect, which is now in use. So he said, so I guess there was a close connection to Welsh in the language of the Hopi. So that's kind of interesting.
And I guess you would find it would be interesting because the dates, the hundreds of years later, how much does the language change? So, I mean, he's saying, hey, they could pronounce, but it's not the way we speak it now. So that's quite an interesting thing,
Yeah, that is fascinating.
And we with the story there's two different dates, right? So there's like an 1100 date.
Yeah, we're going to go into the other one.
Than that.
Yeah. So this is most of these researchers are going off of the 1170 date, the idea of Prince Madoc coming in 1170. But we're going to throw a little wrench into the story here, and we're going to talk about a Prince Madoc that showed up in 563, or five. It's actually should be 562, but we'll just say, for accuracy, we'll say 562, even though my slide here says 563. Okay, so this takes us to a whole new thing. And now this is video that each of us can find on YouTube. You can go to YouTube. This is actually from the YouTube channel is called Real British History. And that's the name of the YouTube channel. And you can go on there. Now, they haven't posted videos for a long time. So I don't know. I think I know one of these men have already passed away. And this is video that is 93. This is 1993 or 92. So it's going on 30 years old that this video was recorded. It might even be earlier. But the VHS, you can tell it's a VHS tape. And it's like there's a 2.5 hour long file video that's on YouTube through the Real British History YouTube channel. And I found this from Lee Pennington. Now, you remember, I just want to back up a little bit. I think it was last week we talked about, or 2 weeks ago, we talked about Lee Pennington and the Brandenburg Stone. So when Lee Pennington talked about the Brandenburg Stone, he talked about the Coelbren language. And these gentlemen are some of the gentlemen that Lee Pennington mentioned that were celebrating the Brandenburg Stone. And they were able to do all those different translations. And that's what we're going to kind of go into real quick. So this the man on the left is Jim Michael. The one on the right is Alan Wilson. Alan Wilson is a Welsh historian, and Jim Michael is the president of the Ancient Kentucky Historical Society, or was. He's since passed away, and Lee Pennington has since taken his place. And so this is their story, okay? And they went into long. I try to do a condensed version of this video because it is very long, and the audio is terrible, and so you really have to sit and listen and go through it. And I went through this 2.5 video twice, by the way. So that's
Wow.
I got nothing left to do in my life, but this was really fascinating to go through. So here are the facts, or the points. One is that in 562, Madoc Morfran, that's his last name, Morfran, I guess. I think that's his last name, came to America, and he's the brother of King Arthur II. Now, this is not King Arthur I, this is King Arthur II. And he had when he returned, he described to Britain this about the Native American, like where he went, this new place he went to. He went back in 572 AD. So he went for 10 years. In fact, I'm gonna skip forward here. I'm gonna go to my other notes. All right. So let me back this up. So supposedly there was a great comet that struck Britain in the middle of the 6th century.
Britain, right?
What's that?
Northern Britain.
Yeah.
They said it was northern Britain, and it kind of decimated the area. It flattened a lot of buildings. It was the equivalent of, what did they say, like 5 atomic bombs?
Like 100
something
atomic
like that.
bombs
100?
or something.
Wow.
Yeah,
crazy.
like a whole bunch. Like it did a lot of death and destruction, killed animals, plants, buildings were destroyed. And Madoc was supposedly at sea during this time. And when he was at sea, it caused him to lose his direction. Like it moved him away. And I don't know how that works. I've never lived through a comet landing, but somehow it caused him to lose his direction. And he was gone at sea for 10 years. So he was, and while he was gone, he finally came back in 572, and he tells of his journey. And they were like, well, you were gone for 10 years. How you can't be at sea for 10 years. Where were you? And he talks about this other place that he went to. And so he comes back and he reports it to King Arthur II. And the King Arthur thing, that's where we're kind of throw it in, because King Arthur is supposed to be a legend, right? It's supposed to be an English, like the guy never existed. It's something you see in Disney movies or whatever, and movies. But according to Alan Wilson, the English version of King Arthur is fable, and the Welsh version is real, is like it really happened, like it's part of Welsh history.
Like the British stole it from them when they rewrote history, and they turned them into a fairy tale, right?
Yeah, probably so. So that's where it gets kind of muddy, and that's what we're gonna hopefully unravel here a little bit. So Madoc comes back, tells about it, and he says it's this wonderful place, and we ought to really consider going there. And so the government there at the time has this big council and claims that this whole movement is Madoc going to this new world is an act of God, and that they plan on going to this new land. And so Madoc, obviously the brother of Arthur II, takes 700 ships to the New World.
Wow.
So they take a good, like, estimated about 7,000, or 70,000 people probably. That is what is estimated to come here to the New World, and that's the theory of Madoc. And so in this video that you see, they kind of go into what their plausibility is. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the next slide. So there's the first part of this video, they're on TV. They're on local Kentucky TV, because Kentucky is where a lot of stuff is found, and in that area. And then they wrote this book. And so now on the left, you see a book called Arterus Rex Discovered, and which says the authentic discovery of King Arthur, including the inscribed memorial stone and tomb. And the theory is that King Arthur came to America, that he actually came here. And so as I go through my notes here, so the author here is Baron Blackett and Alan Wilson. So now Alan Wilson is, again, the Welsh historian who brings about the Coelbren language, and we're going to talk about that here in a second. But the other guy here is James Michael. He's the one giving the presentation. So we never see Baron Blackett. I think that's how his name, but he's the one that helped write this book with Alan. And as you can see by the cover of the book, they look like they're rock stars standing in front of these tablets, and they look like maybe they're like Wham or Wang Chung or something. They look like but they're really standing in front of what they feel like are artifacts that have to do with King Arthur. And to their credit, that one of the things they did was they tried to go to the original text and not just hearsay information, but they tried to go to the original text. And these are some of the things they think they found, was that Arthur, that there's actually two King Arthurs. And that's one of the confusion pieces of story, is that you have King Arthur fighting the Romans, and then you have King Arthur fighting the Saxons, and they're like several hundred years apart in dating. And so how could King Arthur, and their take on it is that there's two King Arthurs. There's a King Arthur the first, and then several generations down, there's King Arthur II, and then King Arthur has a little brother, and his name is Madoc. So there's a little bit of the setup as to who Madoc, this other theory of Madoc of who he could be, that had come to America. And he said he brought Arthur here, and that Arthur showed up here in, let's see, that Arthur came here in 573, and then he died, and then he was brought back, or 574. He came, supposedly Arthur II came to America 574, lived here for about 4 years, and then he died. And he was killed supposedly by a native, whoever that is, whoever else was here. Maybe it was a Lamanite. Hard to tell. So, and they took his body and they embalmed him, and they put him on a ship and they sent him back, and that his body is actually in a tomb now that you can actually, I don't know if you can go see it, but they say that there's a location for it. I didn't catch whether you can actually still see the tomb or not. But anyway, so these are all things that, like I said, you guys who are watching, if you know more, if you've got some other info, by all means, comment, because a lot of this is kind of new to us, even though it looks like, from this 30-year-old video, it's been talked about for a long time. So forgive us for still kind of figuring these out. So anyway, so James Michael does this long presentation. So look for it on YouTube. It's hard to hear, but James Michael Allen Wilson makes a really good case, actually. But there is a few things in their story that are missing a little bit, and we're going to go to that in a minute. The Coelbren language. Now, the Coelbren language we talked about when we talked about Lee Pennington and the Brandenburg Stone. And so we remember that Coelbren was a language that they say a Welshman created in the 1700s, but Lee Pennington and others think the Coelbren language is considerably older. Lee Pennington said that he found Coelbren language as early as 490, and that a lot of the stones you're finding are actually written in, while we think it's Hebrew, they believe it could be Coelbren. And so anyway, so this is James Michael. So Tomlinson was the one who discovered the gravecreekstone that we talked about last week, and that's what you're seeing here is the gravecreekstone. And he mentions the gravecreekstone being one piece of evidence, another evidence of Prince Madoc being here, and that this stone, which was found in Grave Creek in West Virginia, is actually Coelbren, according to him. And here's what's interesting is this part of the video. When you see this part of the video, you see James Michael. This is what he said. He said, Tomlin, who did the dig in the Grave Creek Stone, he waited for a few years after Joseph Smith found his gold tablets because his tablets were too controversial. And so Tomlinson found this stone not long after Joseph Smith found the gold plates, according to him, and then held on to him because Joseph Smith's story was so controversial. And then eventually he made this tablet more public and brought in Henry Schoolcraft, and then they looked at it and so forth. And like we talked about last week with the Grave Creek Stone. So that was kind of interesting connection there. And let's see. And then we talked, I think last week when we talked about Coelbren, or 2 weeks ago, we talked about the Back Creek Stone. And that when you translate this in Coelbren, it says the ruler Madoc he is. So they bring that up again in this lecture, and they present this stone, and they present other stones that we talked about. That Coelbren, if you were to translate into Coelbren, that it would come out to something totally different. And then here's one that's a little crazy. check this one out. Boom. So in this slideshow that these guys give, they show these plates. And what is that familiar to anyone? I think to most of our audience, they'll know this one. Does that look familiar to you, Mark?
Oh yeah. Yeah, those are the Kinderhook plates.
Kinderhook
So
plates.
mhm.
And what's funny is these guys will call this a stone. And they just glossed over this image. They put it up.
I can see why you might, like, if you looked at it in a book and it's black, like it is. I can see you thinking it might be slate or something,
Yeah,
because
that's true.
the original Kinderhook were like brass. So I could see, if you're doing research and you're not necessarily paying attention to materials and descriptions, and you'd think it was a tablet or
Well, and
something.
plus I think this is like a this isn't really even like a photocopy. This is a drawing, and then it's reversed so that you can actually
Yeah.
read the letters. So
Those are the drawings that were published in the Times and Seasons.
yeah.
So yeah, that's what was made available to people. But if you weren't paying attention to description, the written description of what they actually look like, I can see someone say that they're a tablet.
So
But
when
what's interesting to me is, like, when you look at the Coelbren on all the other tablets, this looks quite a bit different. I'm not an expert on language by no means, but
yeah, like
it
that.
just looks different. I don't know. I mean, like in our last podcast, we did show some comparisons with
Mhm.
language, and it seems like Coelbren is very straight. Like, the characters are very,
Yeah, there's not a lot
at
of
right
curves.
angles. There's not a lot of curves, and the
Yeah.
Kinderhook plates, it seems like it's very curvy. And it might be material, I don't know. I mean, who
Yeah.
knows?
So he
But
he
that's just my observation. So
he attempted to translate this in Colburn, and I didn't. The video was so bad during that moment that I couldn't hear what he was saying. I only heard a mention of a flood, something, 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 flood, avoid the flood, something, and it was really kind of hard to hear. So I couldn't really tell. But I just wanted to show this real quick to show that they obviously used the Kinderhook plate, but probably didn't even know where it came from, which I was really surprised that they didn't even really do the research on where this came from, because obviously they called it a stone and saw it. And so I'm really curious as to where the Kinderhook plates, when they received this information, where they got it from. So, which is really kind of fascinating.
and it's one of those things where you look at it and it seems like these guys are studying Coelbren, so they want everything to fit within Coelbren, right? Like, it
Yeah.
just seems like that's the direction that they're going in. And that I feel that happens quite a bit. If that's what your focus of study is, that's what you want it to fit in. And what we might make that mistake too, where we want everything to fit within the Book of Mormon. Like, we just desperately want it to fit, so we'll say, hey, this is evidence of Book of Mormon, where it may not be. So you have to be able to be open to what is it, you know what are the possibilities of what it could be. um so I think that it's important when you're reading and you're looking at all this, just be open about it.
That's right.
um because you can't, if you take an artifact and it's clearly, there's a pictograph of something, and you're trying to make it fit into what you want to make it fit, and it doesn't, then that just causes problems later. So
Yeah. Yeah.
just
It's
kind of makes it look kind of weird, and I think that might be what he's trying to do, is say, hey, look, we've got all these examples of Coelbren, and it may not be. Like,
yeah.
the Kinderhook plates may not be there. It looks quite a bit different.
Well, and
You can
what you're,
see on the Kinderhook plates, there's kind of pictographs at the top,
yeah.
and you don't really see that with Coelbren very often, or I've never seen it. the examples that I've seen. So it's just, just keeping things open, you
Yeah,
know.
you always got
Um,
to keep it open, and they say that Coelbren, the way Coelbren was read was it was on a stick, like there'd be a stick, and then there'd be letters, and then you turn it around, and then there'd be more letters, and then you turn around, and there'd be more letters, and so that was kind of interesting. I'd never heard of that, and so there's one point in which our Alan Wilson mentioned that in the scriptures you talk about the stick of Joseph and the stick of Judah, and he was looking at it as Coelbren, as you were reading Coelbren on a stick, which is kind of interesting. So it kind of fit whatever the theory was, um, but yeah, this I just found this again. Most of what we're sharing today probably totally not true, or it's just an alternate version of what might be really true. And so you always have to leave your information open. But again, you're seeing people taking out of place artifacts that we're seeing, such as the Creek stone, such as the Gravecreekstone, and so forth, and putting a story to it, and and you never know, and we will never know, probably until we're all dead, and or the millennium or something. Sometime will a lot of these
and
books
there
will be
might
open.
some things that pop up that more pieces to the puzzle that give us a better picture of
That's
what we're
right.
looking at.
Yeah.
But this stuff is pretty new. I mean, these discoveries, when you're looking at the history of the earth and whatnot, the discoveries of these languages is of finding them in North America is pretty new. So
Yeah.
it's going to take a little bit of time, and hopefully we'll get more pieces of the puzzle. But you gotta keep your mind open a little bit, and not try to just say, oh well, this has to be this or this has to be that, but keeping your
Yeah.
mind open,
That's right.
because forcing it to fit into something just is not a good way to approach it. So
Yeah. So anyway, so yeah, good call there, Mark. And that's probably the number one lesson we pull from this is to be careful of the information that we find, and just sticking it into a place and saying that's this or that's that. There's the theory is fun, and that's as far as it goes. And here are some great books. I will admit these books, those other books that I showed you, I've read a lot of those. These three I have not read, and so these I'm probably going to maybe purchase for myself. So if you guys find these are all available somewhere online, whether it be eBay or even Amazon. You'll be able to find the resources where this information is coming from. And I think it's fascinating. If anybody here knows more about what we talked about, by all means, share it and put it on our comments. And also, like always, subscribe, like, and share if you like what you're seeing today. We have more content coming and a lot of more research. And like I said, we'll be having guests. And we're also hoping to be able to make season 3. We're going to give it kind of one last go here to see if you can donate to our Give, Send, Go account so that we can have some funds to be able to pay for another season of Hidden in the Heartland, where we travel and we interview people and we do reenactments and we put them in a television type form and air them. They'll probably mostly be for the YouTube channel, but we're excited to share more stuff because there is tons of it out there. And I can
if
tell you from spending the hours I've spent studying, I'm like, oh, there's this thing and there's this thing. And this is
yeah.
stuff we've never learned at a lot of the, Heartland conferences that we're missing, in my opinion. So,
And if every subscriber donated just a few dollars,
yeah,
that's huge. Like Kels would be able to go out and do interviews, and something that we've noticed, and I'm not trying to dog on anybody, but we're talking about conferences and things like that, but it seems like it's a rehashing of the same material, and we are striving to find what's hidden in North America. What are the things we're trying to put all of these puzzle pieces together. There's been plenty of people out there that have done research, have dedicated to their lives to figuring out who was here in North America before Columbus. And we're trying to put those pieces together and provide that information for you guys, so you kind of know what direction to go in if you're researching on your own. So, if every subscriber donated just a few dollars, that gets us further along to be able for Kels to be able to go out and interview some of these people that have dedicated their lives to this research. So we'd appreciate it.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, there is a lot more content out there, and we've kind of, one day we're going to have that hard discussion about the Heartland movement. We just won't today, but there are a lot of things that I feel like we're missing, and that we could be talking about if we just stayed the course. And we, over the last 10 weeks alone, you have probably seen new stuff that you've probably never heard of before. I know it's a lot of stuff that I've never heard of before. And I don't always learn at some of the Heartland conferences. That's why I bring up the Ancient Artifact Preservation Society. You get more Book of Mormon evidence out of that conference than any of the other conferences you see in Utah. Seriously. And there's a lot of, while it may not all be about Book of Mormon, it's actually from people who are not Mormon, who don't have a skin in the game. And they provide some great content and evidence. And you'll be surprised how they will talk about things like Moroni and Lehi and Joseph Smith with actual respect, even though they're not members of the church and may never become a member of the church. But they present it as possibilities, just like Prince Madoc, just like St. Brandon, just like all of these other, theories of who came to America long before Columbus. And so we think it's a fascinating evidence. And again, it's not there to create your testimony. It's there simply to be fun information. And as we dive into the Book of Mormon next year, always kind of go about it with an open mind and open heart, and then continue on with your own personal testimony as you read the scriptures. So anyway, there's our episode, our last one for the year. And we want you to keep studying. Maybe we'll post some past things or some stuff that might be in the vault somewhere. But hopefully we'll start right at the beginning of the new year. Every Tuesday morning, we'll be posting. And you guys, thank you for joining us. And we'll see you again in a few weeks with Hidden in the Heartland podcast.